What's up, everybody, man? Back, welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing a new movie review. This video is not going to be received well. First of all, if you could like the video or share it, I'd appreciate, because Lord knows it's not getting promoted by YouTube and none of my subscribers are going to watch this because it isn't Godzilla. But I wanted to talk about Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker simply because I've seen the way it's being received and I don't necessarily think it's being received the way it logically should be. And so we're going to talk about that. This is a review of the movie, by the way. This isn't me talking about other people's reviews of the movie for the most part. This is my review of the movie, and so that's that. And here, in order to discredit myself in the eyes of the Star Wars fandom, I will give my little thoughts on the franchise as a whole. Also, discrediting myself in the eyes of the Star Wars fandom isn't something I'm particularly worried about because there has never been a more toxic fan base than the Star Wars fan base, and so I don't really feel bad about dissociating myself from them and discrediting myself in front of them. It just isn't one of my concerns. And also, on that note, I'm not going to sit here and debate with anybody because people are too emotional when it comes to Star Wars, and it doesn't interest me enough to debate with you, okay? Everyone on Twitter who thinks I'm going to debate with them about this movie, I'm not. Star Wars. It's a franchise that I don't know how it's possible, but I always forget that I like it. It's a franchise that when I think on, I go, I don't like Star Wars. It's boring. Space movies bore me. I don't like space movies. And then I rewatch Star Wars and I go, but not all space movies bore me because these ones are solid. It's a good franchise. The movies that I like in the Star Wars franchise, there's more than the movies that I dislike. I like A New Hope a lot. I like Empire and Jedi. Those three movies, they're awesome. They're great. Force Awakens, I do enjoy Force Awakens. And don't get me wrong, I acknowledge that there are problems with every Star Wars movie, especially the new ones, Force Awakens and Last Jedi, which is on my top list as well. I'm not ranking them, by the way, either. But Force Awakens and Last Jedi, those are two movies that I like. And I'm acknowledging that there are problems with those movies, glaring issues that maybe someday if I ever decide to solo review each Star Wars movie, I will talk all about why I dislike a lot of aspects of those movies, but why at the end of the day I still think they're better than they are bad. And then Rogue One is one of my favorite Star Wars movies. It's probably my second favorite Star Wars movie right after Empire. I struggle between where I want to put Rogue One and A New Hope because those are kind of the ones that are up there. So Empire's my favorite, and then I don't know if I like A New Hope or Rogue One. I don't know which one of those comes out on top, but I loved Rogue One. The okay Star Wars movies, these are the ones that I'll watch, but I may not enjoy a whole bunch. I put Jedi on here, even though Return of the Jedi is on my goods list, because as much as I love a lot of Return of the Jedi, there's a little portion about an hour into the movie where they make it to Endor that's just awful. It just is. It's horrible. I hate it so much. But everything leading up to Endor, and then everything from pretty much when Vader picks Luke up, so there's only about 20 to 30 minutes of stuff that I hate. I just can't stand it. Everything that really happens on Endor, I can't stand. The second they get off Endor, back when Luke goes up to the Emperor, that's when I'm like, some quality stuff right here. And then Revenge of the Sith. It's one that I don't particularly like the movie, but it's got enough kind of crazy stuff happening, and the final battle is enough to make me go, I'll watch it. It's not terrible, and it's not. It's the best of the prequels, and there are a lot of redeeming aspects about it. However, I just think there's a lot of problems with it as well. The movies that I don't like. The Phantom Menace, I think, is a boring movie, and that is amplified by an imperceivable amount going into Attack of the Clones, because Attack of the Clones is an awful movie. It's boring. It's so boring. Phantom Menace is bad, and yeah, it is boring for the middle portions, but at least it starts out okay and ends strong. Attack of the Clones doesn't start strong. It doesn't end strong. It is a boring, bad movie. And Solo. I think Solo is also just too boring to fall anywhere else. I think it's just, that's the biggest sin it makes as well, is that it just is boring and uninspired. But the best Star Wars property, in my opinion, The Mandalorian. I don't actually know if that's my favorite, because I think I would rather watch like Empire and A New Hope. But at the same time, The Mandalorian's really good in my opinion. I think it's awesome. I love the Western stuff that it has. I love the Western genre. And so having that, but Star Wars, it's great. I love it. So that's my little background on Star Wars for those of you guys out there who care. And that's nobody who subscribes to this channel. I guarantee this video does horrible in terms of views. Thank you guys for supporting everything I do. I appreciate it. Star Wars: The Rise Rise of Skywalker is the newest Star Wars movie and the final Star Wars movie in the Skywalker saga. And when I say final, that's a hard quotations on final. I would highly doubt that this will be the last movie in the Skywalker saga. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. This is a spoiler-free review, so don't worry about spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I will do a spoiler review later. The movie was destined to fail. There was literally nothing they could have done. There was no way. There was nothing they could have done. There wasn't. The Last Jedi split the fan base so much that they had nothing to do. I've seen the argument, and I actually agree with it, that this movie should have been split into two movies, but I would argue that it shouldn't have needed to be. It should have just been the trilogy. This movie is its own trilogy smashed into one film, and that's the biggest problem with it, is that so much happens that did not get covered in the last two movies that it's like, wow, we're starting fresh almost. Crazy. We know these characters, but not really, because they're all a year progressed, but like 10 years progressed in terms of where we left them. They just don't even seem like the same characters. Everything is just wildly different than how we left it, and that's the issue that I see people saying. But at the same time, this movie was destined to fail. It was destined to fail because there was no coming back from The Last Jedi, a movie which I will remind you I liked. I liked The Last Jedi. I think it did a lot of bad things, but I also think it could have been salvaged, not in the eyes of the Star Wars fan base. It could have been salvaged in the eyes of people like me who are Star Wars fans, but not hardcore enough to be one of those people going to war with other fans. No, not at all. This movie was never gonna succeed because it was already hated long before it came out. People already decided that they hated it. It was just destined to fail in the eyes of the fan base. I thought of a good comparison when editing, and I wanted to film this to get my thoughts on it out. The new Star Wars movie is like the new YouTube Rewind in a lot of ways. It was destined to fail. People were going into it wanting to hate it. The last one was so polarizing that there was no coming back from it, and so the movie was never going to please anybody. YouTube Rewind tried to please everybody by giving them exactly what they wanted, and people were still let down. That is exactly what this movie did. They went, okay, we did something you didn't like last time, so this time we're just going to give you everything you asked for, and people are still let down. It is the exact same situation. Can't even hardly review this movie concisely because it's just being pulled in so many different directions by fans, and the movie itself feels like it's being pulled in different directions as well between what they wanted to do and what Rian Johnson has forced them to do. Again, just saying I like The Last Jedi, just there wasn't much coming back from it. Kind of feels like it should have been the end, right? That should have had a definitive ending because they didn't do a great job of continuing the story. To skip the whole everything and just go straight into it for people who are interested, it's okay. It's just an okay movie, The Rise of Skywalker. It's not great, it's not bad, it's just okay. I'd say go check it out if you want. It's not the best movie though. Not the best Star Wars movie, but it's also not a bad Star Wars movie, and it's not a bad movie. Let's talk about the goods though. What did I like about it? Again, still non-spoiler. There's some pretty beautiful cinematography mixed throughout, some bad cinematography, so that winds up in both categories. But yeah, some of the shots are really beautiful. Kylo Ren is still one of my favorite Star Wars characters. He has been one of my favorite Star Wars characters since The Force Awakens. I think he's a super interesting character. I still think he's a super interesting character. I think this movie does a great job with him. I think his dynamic with Rey is very interesting, and this movie continues that, albeit it's a little confusing how it continues that, but it continues that. The Force is strong with this movie. One of my biggest complaints with the Star Wars franchise overall is that the Force exists and people don't use it the way they realistically should. If people had the Force, they'd be using it like Eleven from Stranger Things uses her powers, and yet it feels like in Star Wars everyone's too reluctant to use the Force ever until they absolutely need to, and this movie's like, nope, it's balls to the wall. They're using the Force whenever they want. It's awesome. That's exactly what I want to see. That's kind of how the video games are, which is what I'm kind of used to, so I like that aspect of it a lot. Rey and Finn are pretty sweet in this one. Poe is going to be hard to talk about without getting into spoilers, so we won't talk about him. But Rey and Finn are pretty sweet in this one. I think they have some good dynamics, and then there's some decent fan service. What about the bads for this movie? Well, from an objective standpoint, this movie's kind of sloppily edited. It's got a very messy plot. Way too much happens. There's a lot of pacing issues, and it disregards continuity, which is something that I always dislike. It doesn't necessarily disregard it, but it just pretends that more happened in the last movies than actually happened. And half the movie is visually uninteresting. You can't even tell what you're looking at half the time. Leia is awkward as hell. I know Carrie Fisher's passing is a huge tragedy. They should have had the character die off screen. I know that would be terrible, but the way they tried to handle it is so uncomfortable, and it makes Leia seem like almost a joke in my opinion, to where it's almost like she's hardly reacting to the things around her in a way that makes sense. Like, she's reacting to things, sure, but it's very clearly that those things she's reacting to were written in a way so that the footage they had could react to it it rather than her reacting to it naturally. It's super awkward. It's clunky. As much as I appreciate them trying, I think there was either a better way to go with it. You go the CG route, which I know some people aren't down for, but you go the CG route, or you just have to say, well, the character's gone. Something happened. She's either passed away, become one with the Force, or she's just not in this movie for some reason. Something else to explain what happened other than what they did, because I think what they did was super uncomfortable. This movie tries to introduce a lot of new elements. A lot of plot twists happen throughout this movie constantly. Like the first 5 minutes of this movie is like bam, bam, bam of reveals. Everything's super predictable though. Everything is too predictable. And the movie has a lot of sloppy damage control. Like I said, it's got some decent fan service, but at a certain point you feel like they're force feeding it to you, like they're just shoving it down your throat, like, aren't you happy? Which is what I said. This movie was destined to fail, because the thing that people hated about The Last Jedi was how it disregarded everything the fans wanted, disregarded a lot of the things that seemed like they were going to be set up in The Force Awakens, and then it was like, just kidding, we're not actually interested in telling those stories. And a lot of people were pissed about it. So this movie, they go, all right, let's give the fans what they wanted. Everything the fans wanted, let's give it to them. And that's a problem too, because now that fans have everything they want, they still aren't satisfied. So there was no way to win. There just wasn't. And that's what I'm saying. This movie was destined to fail. But I would say go in and see it with an open mind, like I did. I went in expecting it to be one of the worst Star Wars movies ever. Actually, I was going in expecting it to be the worst Star Wars movie ever, but I was open to it being good. And I was open to it doing what it wanted to do and trying. And at the end of the day, I thought I'd give a good effort at trying to please fans and tell the best story they could given the circumstances. Like I said, they did an all right job. And that's how I would describe this movie. It's just all right. It's not great. It's not good. It's not bad. And it's not horrible. It's just all right. It's at the bottom end of my okays section. I would definitely prefer to watch Return of the Jedi, and I think I would prefer to watch Revenge of the Sith over this one. It's still not a terrible movie, so I don't think it deserves the reputation it's been getting. And that's my review for Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Tell me what you guys thought down below about this movie, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. D-Man, out.